You should have knowledge, but also you must be able to justify how you got that knowledge. Because otherwise, your statement can be just a lucky guess. But the importance of that is, if you can justify your knowledge, then any other person can also look at that knowledge and get that knowledge. So justification aspect is really something very important, because that is to what we are going to next when we talk about the means of knowledge. Means, how do we get knowledge? Because it is very important that in Buddhism also, in science too, you see this aspect. Now, when a scientist do something and then he does an experiment, any other person must be able to repeat that experiment, right, and get the same result. Now, in ordinary scientific textbook, when you are in high school, you are studying science, there are certain, say, tests and experiments. You go to lab and, you just do those tests, and then you get exactly more or less the same result. Now, which means that knowledge can be justified. Okay, in science, any person can repeat the test and get the result. Now, this idea is also very important in Buddhism. Now, Buddha attained enlightenment, and then he taught other people how to get the enlightenment, and then other people did the same thing and got enlightenment, right? Even today, now more than 2,500 years later, if somebody attains enlightenment, this is how Buddha taught. So in other words, in a different language, we can say that any person who is getting enlightened today even, what that person is doing is repeating the test, repeating what the Buddha did. Buddha said that this is what I did. Okay? Now, this is basically, you can see that there is a similarity in science and Buddhism. I'm not saying Buddhism is scientific or anything, but there is a similarity in the procedure. What the Buddha said, ultimately, you have to do and get the same result. Then only know that Buddha said truth. Otherwise, how do we know that? We have only the inferential knowledge. Conjecture, some kind of, about something we are not 100% sure. In Sanyutta Nikaya, there is a very interesting sutta called Purana Anjasa Sutta. Purana Anjasa Sutta. Purana Anjasa Sutta means Purana. Purana means, Anjasa means road, or you can say path. Road and the path, or whatever. The idea behind this metaphor is very important. Buddha refers to the Purana Anjasa, ancient path. Now, what he means by this ancient path is the path followed by the Buddha is not only his path, it is the path followed by all the enlightened people before him. And Buddha followed that path and Buddha got the result. And then Buddha taught other people how to get the same result. It is simple as that. Of course, the path is not simple, but the procedure, you can see that it is pretty straightforward. You follow it and you get the same result, and then you know that it is true. In a way, we can connect this to the concept of justification of knowledge. You get the knowledge and then you justify it. Now, if the Buddha says that to the 5 Panchavagya Bhikkhu that he attained arahanthood, actually they did not believe him anyway in the first place. They subsequently believed. But they must have believed Buddha completely when they themselves became an arahant. Then only you know that Buddha is telling the truth, right? from your experience, because you repeated the text and you got the result. That's the justification of knowledge. So, in other words, it is not merely sufficient to say that you have some knowledge, but you have to show how other person can repeat it, how other person can get the same result. Clear? Okay. So we will move on to justification further, and we are talking about the means of knowledge. Means of knowledge means how we derive knowledge. How do we get knowledge? Now this question has been an interesting question in philosophy from the very beginning. But when we talk about Buddhism, also we can see that it has been a very important question. How do we get knowledge? But when we talk about philosophy, we are talking not about the Buddhist enlightenment knowledge or anything. We are talking about pretty ordinary knowledge. How do we get knowledge? Now, in my first part of the discussion, we looked at what knowledge is. Now, we looked at many different parts, like propositional knowledge, skill knowledge, direct experiential knowledge, and so on. Now, the question is, how do we get knowledge? Now, traditionally, there are two views, rationalism and empiricism. Rationalism is the view that knowledge originates from reason, in the sense, act of reasoning or rational or reasoning faculty. Now, rationalism comes from the word reason. So, English language, we use this word in a sense, reasoning. Reasoning means something we do. That's like logical thinking, logical argumentation is something we call reasoning. Now, you remember when we discussed Chintamaya Panya. Chintamaya means you are thinking in your mind and about the things. Now, similar idea is there in reasoning. But we also have the view that rational or reasoning faculty. Now, it refers to something little different and deeper. Now, there is also a belief that among us there is some kind of faculty, some kind of in a way organ, aspect in our brain or in our thinking that makes us rationally thinking in a manner. So rational faculty, like I have my other faculties like eye, ear, nose, tongue, and different faculties. Similarly, we have what is called rational faculty. So through rational faculty, we exercise, we do rational faculty, and then through that we come to know certain things. So rationalism in that sense is the view that knowledge originates from reasoning. So this is the idea. Now we will go into detail of it later, but basically I am trying to define the term. Empiricism is the view that we receive knowledge through our five senses or sensory experience. So empiricism means basically keyword is experience. In rationalism, keyword is reason. In empiricism, it is experience. Now, what is experience? Experience is what we get from my eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. Now, from these five senses, Buddhism does talk about sixth sense also, mana. But basically, in the Western philosophical tradition, they talk about the five senses, basically our physical senses. So through our physical senses, we come to know the world. I see, I hear, I smell, those things. So through those things, to think about it, imagine the situation where you did not have these five. What will happen to you? Actually, there will not be outside world for you, right? How do we know that outside world is there? Because we see it, because we hear it, because we smell it, touch it. Every time I am standing, you are sitting, but we are touching, physically connecting. So that's how we know that external world is there. But if our five senses are gone, external world will not exist for us, right? So we know it from our senses. Okay, so these are the two basic views, considered, the means of knowledge, how we get knowledge. However, these are not all. Now, when we look at this whole thing from historical point of view, we can see that there have been other things also. Let me go through this the pretty quickly with you. Traditionally, in philosophy, reason and experience have been identified as sources of knowledge. This is common for both Western and Indian philosophical traditions. Prior to the systematic beginning of philosophy in the West, for example, those pre-Socratic philosophers in whom religion, philosophy and science intermingled were mainly rationalists who speculated about the nature of reality. But we cannot trace any developed standpoint of sources of knowledge at this stage. In the Western tradition, since Plato was a rationalist and since he marked the beginning of systematic Western philosophy, rationalism, we may say, preceded empiricism. Now, this is basically some historical note. Traditionally in philosophy, reason and experience have been identified. Now, this is common for both Western and Indian philosophy. Now, rationalism and empiricism, although we discuss here as basically means of knowledge as in Western philosophy, but it's not only in the Western philosophy. Indian philosophy also we can see that the basic two means of knowledge were rationalism and empiricism. So they were there. Even in Buddhism, we will see this when I come to discussion on Buddhism, I will show you, we will have this. Prior to the systematic beginning of philosophy in the West, now the subject called philosophy today started in ancient Greece. Philosophy means, philo means friend or lover, sophia means wisdom. So the idea was philosophy means the person who loves wisdom, or the lover of wisdom is the person who is philosopher. So in that sense, philosophy started in ancient Greece. Now, if you take pre-Socratic philosophers, now when we discuss ancient Greek philosophy, we take Socrates as the mark of the beginning of systematic philosophy, and then all the other philosophers we say pre-Socratic philosophers. Pre-Socratic philosophers. Now, if you look at pre-Socratic philosophers, of course, in their ideas you can see religious view, scientific view about the world. So, and also some philosophical speculation. Speculation means, again, thinking, reasoning. You speculate means you keep on thinking about certain things. So that particular stage was there in the ancient Greek philosophy. What is over there beyond stars, and why these things are happening in this manner. So you speculate on many different things in many different manners. So this is basically what pre-Socratic philosophers did. Now, in the pre-Socratic philosophy in ancient Greece, we consider Thales, Thales, Thales. So Thales is considered to be the first philosopher in the ancient Greece, Thales. Now, we don't know much about Thales, but he is known for saying that everything is water. Now, his main idea was that everything is water. Now, what is the significance of this? When you say everything is water, is everything water? What about this? Is the water? Well, we see that it is pretty counterintuitive, because when somebody says everything is water, the first reaction will be like, are you gone mad or something? What has happened to you? But then on the other hand, if we really think deeply about it, we know that ultimately Thales was looking beyond the world he sees to look for something fundamental to everything. Like I will connect it to Buddhist philosophy, then you will understand it better. Now in Buddhist philosophy we talk about Mahabhuta Rupa and Upadaya Rupa. What are the Mahabhuta Rupas? Pathavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu. So Apo is water. Now in other words, Buddhists are saying that everything is Pathavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu, right? So Thales is saying everything is Apo. Only. Okay, that's the difference. So again, we can see that Thales is a philosopher. We say him a philosopher because philosophers speculate, okay, what is the origin of these things? What is the beginning of these things? So ultimately he traced that everything originates from water. So that's why. Now you can see that, so Thales is, although in the first impression is we kind of laugh at it, but we should take it seriously. So Thales is considered to be the first philosopher. But for him to say everything is water, I mean, it's a part of science, right? Understanding the external world is basically part of science. So in that sense, we can call him a scientist. But how did he come to that conclusion? By doing some experiment in the scientific lab or something? No. He came to that conclusion by speculation, by thinking. That's all. He didn't do any scientific experiment as scientists do today in the labs. No, he didn't do anything like that. I mean, what he had was, speculation, thinking. Or we can use the word reasoning, right? So he was reasoning, he was speculating. So that's why he is called a philosopher. But on the other hand, you can see that he is also a scientist. And then there are many others, Heraclitus and Xenophanes and whole bunch of pre-Socratic philosophers. Pythagoras talked about the numbers. Heraclitus talked about everything is in the flux, and so on so. So it's a very interesting area to study these pre-Socratic philosophers, but they seem to be very much rationalist. But we cannot trace any developed standpoint of sources of knowledge at this stage. Now in the Western tradition, since Plato was a rationalist, and since he marked the beginning of systematic Western philosophy, rationalism, we may say, preceded empiricism. Now, why do we call Plato is a rationalist? Now, rationalists believe that knowledge comes from reasoning. The other day I talked to you about this story in the dialogue called Meno, where Plato got this slave boy and tried to prove that slave boy knew some fundamentals of mathematics. I mean, slave boy is a person who doesn't have any formal education. But, in this story, Socrates is trying to show that this slave boy who didn't have any formal education had some knowledge about the principles of mathematics. Now, whole idea is this. Somebody can ask, where does this boy gets knowledge? So the name of the dialogue is the Meno. In this Meno slave boy experiment. Now, Socrates Plato want to show through Socrates' dialogue that ultimately the slave boy had some knowledge on mathematics. But he did not know that he had this knowledge until Socrates asked questions and got that knowledge out of him. Now, what does this mean? This means that we have knowledge in us. Now, that knowledge can be that what I referred to earlier as rational faculty. So there is some knowledge in us that even we don't know. In other words, when we are born, we have that knowledge. We are born with some knowledge. So Plato thought that the function of a teacher is to get that knowledge out of the student. He had a very interesting philosophy of education. Now in this philosophy of education, sometimes we believe that teachers give knowledge. Now Plato thought that no, nobody can give you knowledge. Plato thought that you have knowledge already in you. So what should the teacher do? teacher's function is to get that hidden knowledge out of you. It's not like teacher giving you knowledge. You already have the knowledge. Teacher helps you. Teacher kind of facilitator. Socrates used this very well-known simile of midwife. Now, midwife doesn't give birth, but of course, she helps others to give birth. There's a difference, right? Okay. Midwife doesn't give birth, but of course, she helps other people to give birth. Now, teacher's function, Plato thought that something like that. Teacher is somebody like a midwife. Okay, you don't give birth. Child is somebody else, but you help that person to get the child coming out. So, this very interesting simile he used. But then, why I am telling you this story now is because that's a kind of rationalism. In other words, to believe that by reasoning, you can get what is inside you out. So one form of rationalism. So Plato's form of rationalism was to believe that you have knowledge in you. By reasoning, by speculation, you get that knowledge out. So, the whole idea. So in that sense, we can say Plato was a rationalist, right? We can see that rationalist or rationalism doesn't mean only one thing. It could mean several things for several different people. But when we talk about Plato, we know that according to Plato, anybody is born with some, basic knowledge. So that's why he said, we cannot give knowledge to anybody. Knowledge is something that we bring in us. And then teachers help us to get that knowledge out. Good teachers help you to get, good knowledge. Not like that. So anyhow, we can say that in the Western tradition, since Plato was a rationalist, since he marked the beginning of systematic Western philosophy, rationalism, we say, preceded empiricism. So in Plato's philosophy, we can see that at this beginning, rationalism was basically the means of knowledge. Okay, and we will talk a little bit about means of knowledge in Indian philosophy. Perception, pratyaksha, and inference, anumana, are the main sources of knowledge in Indian tradition, including the Buddhist tradition. Nyaya tradition has 4. In addition to the perception and inference, it accepts comparison, upamana, and authoritative word shabda, which means divine revelation. The Buddha refers to 3 sources of knowledge in the discourses and identified himself with the third, traditionalist, anusavika, rationalist, takki vimansi, and experientialist, sayang-abhinya, satchikatva. So this is basically the means of knowledge in the Indian philosophy. Now when you look at Indian standard philosophy, there are 2 major means. They seem to be corresponding to rationalism and empiricism I mentioned in this discussion. Now the number 1 is perception, pratyaksha, and inference, anumana. Now these are the 2 sources of knowledge according to Indian philosophy. Now if you look at pratyaksha, pratyaksha is perception, but basically pratyaksha means you see with your eyes. Pratyaksha comes from prati aksha. Prati aksha. What is aksha in Sanskrit? Eye. So prati aksha, pratyaksha. What you get from your eye is pratyaksha. But although it refers to eye, it is not confined to eye. It also could refer to eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, all these things. All the sensory organs. So pratyaksha, pratyaksha. Now this is basically we can say perception, and actually perception is equal to experience, right? You see that both are the same, both can be the same. When you say perception, you perceive through our senses. That means our experience. Experience means basically we get experiences from our senses. So when we say empiricism, key term is, I said, experience. Now, same thing with perception. You perceive means you get the experience. So, fundamentally there is no distinction between, we can say, perception and experience. So in that sense, we can say that both Western tradition and also Indian tradition agrees with the perception as the. And then the second is inference, anumana. Now infer, the Sanskrit word, it can be also the Pali word, mana. Mana comes from man, to measure. So anumana, measuring accordingly, something like that. Anumana, measuring accordingly. Actually, in the Indian context, anumana comes from basically when you have something pratyaksha, perceived, and then based on what you perceive, you draw a conclusion on what you do not perceive. Like classical example, you see smoke in the mountain. You do not see fire, but usually you know that whenever there is smoke, there is fire. So when you see smoke in the mountain, you conclude that there is fire in the mountain. So that is anumana. Based on what you knew is everywhere where there is smoke, there is fire. That's what you know already. So when you see only smoke, then you can anumana or infer that there is fire. So that is inference. That's somewhat similar to what we call rationalism. Because based on the things you know, you reason out. Okay? It's not exactly rationalism, but something goes close to it. So anyhow, we can say that in both traditions we have Western tradition, we have empiricism and rationalism. Here we have perception and inference, pratyaksha and anumana. And Nyaya tradition has 4. In addition to these 2, pratyaksha, anumana, Nyaya tradition is the main logical tradition in the Brahmanic Hindu Indian philosophy. They have pratyaksha, anumana, upamana. Upamana means comparison. Comparison is also they take as a means or source of knowledge. And then shabda. Shabda is word, noise. Shabda is noise, word. So word can also be source of knowledge. Now I'm talking. You hear. So this shabda. So if I'm telling right things, then you will get knowledge. Okay. So that is, you get knowledge from shabda. And what is the Buddhist equivalent for shabda? We have a term. Anybody has any idea? Buddha says that in order to generate samadhi, there are 2 things we need. What is the number 1? Come on. What is number 1? Parato ghosa. Right? Do you know that? Parato ghosa. What is parato ghosa? Yeah, hearing from the other. Noise from the other. Ghosa means noise. Parato means from the other. So the external world is parato ghosa. However, there is a difference here. In Buddhism, when we say parato ghosa, it can be the word of the Buddha, it can be the word of any person who knows. However, in the Indian tradition, when you say shabda, shabda doesn't mean the ordinary sound. Actually, shabda is basically what is revealed in the religious literature, what is revealed by God, by Brahma, by Ishvara, or simply what is revealed by God. So the shabda in this particular context comes in a somewhat little bit different meaning. It is not only the noise of the other, or it's not the noise of any other, but it is what we call, same thing we can call, authoritative word. So word with authority. Word with authority. Word with authority. Now, when we say divine revelation, nobody can doubt it because it comes from God. So, authority. Now, it is interesting question when we come to the Buddhist tradition. What about the Buddhist tradition? How do we take the word of the Buddha? Do we question it, or So we can have a discussion, but I'm not going to do this right away now. But we could discuss that matter also maybe a little later. But basically, the Shabda is authoritative word. So Nyaya tradition has 4 accordingly. Upamana, Shabda, adding to the first 2, Pratyaksha and Anumana. Now briefly let me point it out to you. The Buddha refers to 3 sources of knowledge in the discourses and identifies himself with the 3rd. Now Buddha talks about Anussavika, Takki Vimansi, and Sayang Abhijja Sachikatva. So these 3 sources of knowledge. Number 1 is Buddha talks about Anussavika. Anussavika. So those people who go by Anu Sava. Anu accordingly Sava. Actually the Sanskrit word is Shruti. Shruti. Shruti means what is heard. What is heard. What you have heard. That is Shruti. Now English translation will be revelation. What has been revealed. Now basic idea is a God's revelation. For the ancient societies, people believe that, the God revealed. Now in the Christian religion, they believe that 10 commandments were revealed by God to Moses. So the revelation of God. And the Islamic people believe that Quran was revealed to Muhammad by God. So, revelation, divine revelation. Now that's why, they take every word in Quran to be true. Because you can't doubt it, you can't question it, because it is the divine revelation, it is God who revealed it, So Anussavika. Now Anussavika. You remember Kalama Sutta where Buddha says, Buddha starts with Ma Anussavena. Buddha says that don't go by Anussava. What does it really mean is don't go by this revelation. Actually, he was referring to the Brahmanic tradition. Brahmanic tradition during the time of the Buddha believed that Vedas were the revealed literature. They were revealed to ancient seers by God. Then they came and they, taught it to others. That was the idea. In the Kalama Sutta, Buddha says, Ma Anussavena, don't go by the Anussava. Same thing. So the Shruti or the Vedic tradition. So Anussavika, during the time of the Buddha, there were people who believed that, you get knowledge from divine sources, divine revelation. So divine revelation is considered to be contained in the Vedas. So by reading Vedas, they believe that you get knowledge. And the second group is Takki Vimansi. Takki means Takka. Takka means logic. So Takki means one who uses logic. That means a logician. Vimansi, inquirer. Vimansati means inquire. So logical inquirers. Logicians who are inquirers. So this is one group of people. I will give you an example. If you remember Brahmajala Sutta, Brahmajala Sutta has all 62 views, right? Yeah. In these 62 views, when you read the discourse, you can see that always one category is those who came to those views through Takka and Vimansa. For example, you can become say materialist by perception and different things. And also you can become a materialist simply by without any experience, simply by Takka So not only for materialism, even for the Amaravikepavada and all these vadas, you see one category. Go and look at Brahmajala again. One category is there who came to hold these views simply out of rational thinking. Okay, so the Takki Vimansi is translated into English as rationalist, not by me actually, who studied these categories way long ago, Professor K. N. Jayatilaka. These are his translations. So it is he who translated Anusavika as traditionalist, but basically Anusavika traditionalist in the sense, traditionally who believe in the divine revelation or text. And then we have rationalist, Takki Vimansi. And the third is experientialist, people who base their ideas on experience. So Jayatilaka called them experientially. But the Pali term used is Sayang, Abhijna, Sachikatva. Sayang means oneself, Abhijna means through super knowledge, Sachikatva means having realized. So having realized through one's super knowledge. So Sachikaroti, again, like Pratyaksha. If you analyze Sachikaroti, you see that Sachikaroti means Sa, Achi, Karoti. What is Achi? Akhi. Eye. So Sachi Karoti means you put it into your eye, that means you see it. So Akhi, Achi. So Sachi Karoti means basically you see. But in the Buddhist tradition, word Sachi Karoti is used to realize. Dhamman Sachi Karoti, right? But that means the highest way of realizing. But basically Sachi Karoti means you see from your eye. But seeing can be two different ways. Seeing from your physical eye, seeing for your intellectual eye or eye of wisdom. When the Buddha said Chakhung Udapadi, he refers to Sachikaroti, right? So we have Sayang Abhinya Sachikatva, having realized through your own higher knowledge, Abhinya. Like we had Sanjanati, Vijanati, Pajanati. So now here we can have Abhijanati. Abhinya means Abhijanati. One more term to the list. Sanjanati, Vijanati, Pajanati, Parijanati, Abhijanati. Can you think of any other terms? No, from Jna. From Jna. So anyhow, think about it. Abhijanati. So Abhinya. Now these three are the means of knowledge in Indian philosophy. In fact, I will come to some of these things later with some more detail, but for the time being we will move on. Rationalism. Now let me take you back to rationalism in the Western philosophy. Plato believed that human beings are born with knowledge. In the Meno, one of the dialogues, he tried to prove that a totally illiterate slave boy had knowledge in fundamentals of mathematics. I referred to you already. So now in this sense we can say that Plato was a rationalist, because the boy had knowledge already. He did not know that he had knowledge, but you have to extract it from this person. So in that sense we can call Plato a rationalist. Okay. René Descartes, this word is René Descartes, it's a French word, so this is silent there. René Descartes was a rationalist in somewhat different sense. He said we can discover clear and distinct ideas in our mind when we meditate on it. By meditation he meant carefully analyzing it. Now René Descartes is considered to be the father of modern philosophy in Western tradition. Thales was the father of philosophy. René Descartes, who lived in the 16th century in France, He is considered to be the father of modern philosophy. Now, René Descartes can be described as rational in somewhat different sense. He said we can discover, now these two terms in his rationalism are very important. He said we can, by analyzing our mind, we can find clear and distinct ideas. We can find clear and distinct ideas. Now, clear means there is no any logical unclarity or opaqueness, and the distinct means they are clearly separate from one from another. So we can have clear and distinctly identifiable ideas. He further described these things indubitable, as indubitable. Indubitable means you cannot doubt these things. Indubitable means you cannot doubt. So he believed that by analyzing our mind, ultimately we can come up with a set of indubitable, clear and distinct ideas, and he said those ideas are true. True in the sense they are true regarding the external world and our existence. So René Descartes, now this is a little bit different from Plato's idea, right? It's different from Plato's idea, but he believed that we can discover clear and distinct ideas in our mind, and those ideas are, so there is very interesting, of course I'm not going to teach René Descartes here, but when you look at René Descartes, you can see that in his philosophy, he has a way of, he starts with doubt. He starts doubting everything, giving up everything. Finally, he discovers something which he cannot doubt any further. What is that? He cannot doubt about that he doubts. Right? He doubts about everything. He doubts about everything. But he says that he cannot doubt about doubting. Right? Because the fact that he doubts, he says he cannot doubt. Now that is the first one. So he finds something that he cannot doubt. First he finds everything, all the accepted things can be doubted. Of course, it's a long story, but I'm just giving you a rough idea. So he said that, you cannot doubt the fact that you are doubting. Now if you are doubting is a kind of thinking. Then you cannot doubt that you are thinking. Right? Then finally, Descartes says that you cannot doubt that you are a thinking person. So thinking has the clear and distinct aspect of you. You are a thinking person. Because you can doubt your body. Even your existence of your body, Descartes said you can doubt. But you cannot doubt that you are thinking. Then finally he said famously, I am because I am thinking. Because I can say that I exist, I think. So this is the famous statement, I think. He said, therefore I am. He said, I think, therefore I am. Like, first I cannot doubt, I doubt, but doubting is a kind of thinking. So I cannot doubt that I am thinking, and then finally, then I cannot doubt that I exist as a thinking person. So that's why he famously said, I think, therefore I am. So, then he starts building up from this indubitable, clear and distinct idea. Now, all these things, how did he do? All these things he did just by sitting by the fire, in the cold climate, by the fireplace, comfortably. So what does that mean? It means that all these things, René Descartes came up through his rational thinking, reasoning. Now, according to Descartes, therefore, we can say that reasoning is a very important source of knowledge. So, you see, this is one example from rational thinking. So, René Descartes came, so he thought, meditate. That's why I said, meditate, the word English meditation doesn't mean now bhavana really. Meditation here means you probe into your mind. You contemplate on your mind. You examine the content of your mind. I mean, that can be a part of meditation later, like Dhammanupassana, but basically, meditation here means, you reflect on your mind. So that's the idea. So, this is what, the René Descartes. However, today, there is hardly any philosopher who may be called a rationalist in Platonic or Cartesian sense. Cartesian means it's a little bit abbreviation from Descartes. So Cartesian. Cartesian means belonging to Descartes. Cartesian sense. But there are those who believe in centrality of reasoning in acquisition of knowledge. Now, when we talk about the acquisition of knowledge, getting knowledge, there are people who believe that, reasoning is a very important thing. In other words, what I'm trying to tell you is, when we are talking about, rationalism today, we don't have people who are rationalists in the Platonic sense, like who believe that, we are born with knowledge and, stuff like that. But, these ideas continued. And then we also cannot believe in rationalism in the Cartesian sense, in the sense that, by analyzing our mind, we can find clear and distinct ideas and, so on. And, but on the other hand, we can ask the question, what about the rationalists today? Aren't rationalists there today? There are. I mean, all those philosophers who believe in the active role of reasoning faculty or reasoning as rationalists. But, in today's philosophy, you cannot really find people who can be, okay, these are rationalists and these are empiricists, something like that. Because, we can see subsequently in philosophy, rationalism and empiricism, has come together. So, now this is basically, I described to you two senses of rationalism, how people believed, but then today, how people are rationalists is simply because, not because they are Platonic or Cartesian, but those who believe in the centrality of reasoning in acquisition of knowledge. In knowledge gaining, you can see that reasoning as something, very, very important. So in that sense, we can talk about rationalist today. Let me see whether we can move on. Let me go through this also quickly. John Locke, the 17th century British philosopher and early advocate of empiricism, said that when we are born, our mind is like an empty sheet. He used this Latin term tabula rasa, on which nothing has been written. We gradually acquire knowledge through our senses, he said. Now, John Locke is a modern Western philosopher who lived in the 16th and 17th centuries. He said that he is an empiricist. Now, he said that when we are born, our mind is like an empty sheet, empty white half sheet, nothing has been written. So our mind is like that. He used the word tabula rasa. Tabula means, the paper or sheet. Rasa means, I think, white. So white sheet, tabula rasa. And nothing has been written. And then gradually we acquire knowledge. Like, when you look at a child, from the time, she is born, you can see that, what is this, what is this, what is this, children are a lot of questions because they want to know. And then parents and, others, tell them this is it, and so on. So gradually by seeing, by hearing, children gather knowledge. So they said that, he said that this is empiricism. So according to John Locke, we get knowledge by our senses. He argued against the old belief that people are born with certain forms of knowledge, innate ideas, which was held by rationalists like Leibniz. Leibniz is a German philosopher. John Locke is an English philosopher. Leibniz is a national German philosopher who believed in innate ideas. What is the meaning of the word innate? Innate means inborn. The certain things with which we are born is called innate. So Leibniz held the view that there are innate ideas. In other words, Leibniz thought that we are born with certain ideas. Now, isn't it similar to what Plato said? It's very similar to what Plato said. I mean, Plato held that, the slave boy had already some knowledge. That means he is born with certain. He has some innate knowledge, we can say. So, this in the ancient rationalist tradition, I mean, today nobody believes in innate ideas, at least in the same way Plato did. But the idea, innate ideas, was very powerful by the time of the conclusion of the Middle Ages and beginning of the scientific age, and particularly in the Middle Ages, by extending the Plato's view, like René Descartes said that by analyzing our mind, we can find clear and distinct ideas. And then I said to you that he discovered that he exists as a thinking being, right? Then he went on saying that if I am there, I can't be coming out of nowhere. There must be a creator for me. So he went from I to God. So you can see that rationalism was used in order to support the belief in God. Okay? So it's very, if you take René Descartes started with indubitable ideas, clear and distinct ideas. So he went from thinking, and then he went to I, because I exist, I think, and then he went to God. Now you see, this is a good example how you support the concept of God through rationalism. You see, because you argue from existence of yourself. If I am here, I can't be coming from nowhere. There must be somebody who created me. Who created me? God. So, he goes from rationalism ultimately to support the concept of God. Okay, I think I will wind up from here, but I will continue with you this discussion when I discuss research methodology with you again. What I tried to do today was basically two things. One thing is I tried to look at with you what is knowledge. Now, can we give a simple answer to that question? So what are the various aspects of knowledge? And then we looked at the Buddhist concept of knowledge. And then we found some very interesting, sanjanati, vijanati, pajanati, parijanati, and abhijanati, and, whole set of knowledge, talking about different the phases of knowledge or aspects of knowledge. And through that discussion, we could see that the concept of knowledge is a very complex, not only in Western philosophy, but also even in Buddhism. And the second part of the discussion was on means of knowledge. Basically, we looked at two things, rationalism and empiricism, reason and experience as, giving us knowledge. And also you looked at how Plato is a rationalist and how René Descartes is a rationalist. Leibniz is also a rationalist who believed in innate ideas, but innate ideas are not only of Leibniz. Innate ideas come from very long period before, through Plato, and then they were used in the medieval period, and then subsequently come to the modern period. And then empiricism as experience, we have John Locke, who said that, we are born with, empty sheet, and then it gets filled with information. And we also looked at the Indian tradition, Pratyaksha, Anumana, and then Upamana Shabda, and the Buddhist tradition, three different things Anusavika, traditionalist, rationalist, and then finally experientialist. Okay, these are the basic ideas I try to discuss with you today. So before winding up, do you have any questions or comments or anything you need to get more clarification? Try, yes, why not?
Knowledge is wisdom,
Yeah.
and body is tasteful. Wisdom is pinya. Arhata magas is pinya. Can we call pinya is arhata magas or nirvana is arhata magas?
Panya, I didn't get the last part. Panya is
Panya is arhata magas. And nirvana is pinya.
nirvana.
Nirvana is pinya.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the terms like jnana, panya both have been used in this context, Reverend. So in the usage, there is no difference between two terms, but basically panya has been used in the sila samadhi panya as leading to nirvana, nibbana. But we have to understand, like you remember this statement, Attanga samannagato sekho, dasanga samannagato arha. Sekha has 8, arhant has 10. What is the sekha's 8? The Eightfold Path. Dasanga samannagato arha, arhant has 10. What is the other next to? Sammajnana. What is the last one? Come on. What is the last one? Samma Vimutti. Samma Jnana, Samma Vimutti. So from Samma Jnana comes Samma Vimutti. So Reverend, there the word is used is not Panya, even Jnana. But so Jnana and Panya are interchangeable. Comes Samma Vimutti. So the 10th Arhant has extra 2, not only 8. Number 9, all these things ultimately come Samma Jnana, right knowledge. Now right knowledge can be called Panya also. And then comes Samma Vimutti. Samma Vimutti is the result. Okay. So in other words, what it shows is, knowledge in Buddhism cannot be separated from nirvana, goal, liberation. Yeah, that's what it is. What you need to do is actually, some of you can really for your studies do this kind of deep study on the Buddhist concept. As I said, somebody doing pajanati. Now then we bump into this concept abhijanati, abhijanati. You can study whole abhijanati. What are the contexts? What are the uses of abhijanati? Abhinya. So what are abhinya, So, you really need to do deep into these concepts. That's how you can do research, So you study deeply one concept, looking at, all the instances of that concept and see in what sense this concept. And then you can see whether the same concept has been used differently in the commentaries or even differently in the sub-commentaries and, so on. Okay. Any other question? What about you all? Everything is so clear or what? Okay. All right then. Anyhow, I will be continuing this discussion with you again when we come to research methodology. So we will be talking a little bit about this Western concept of knowledge and also the scientific research. If I have time next when I come again to research methodology. Okay, so I will wind up for today. And then I will see you tomorrow morning for Kathavatu discussion. Thank you. Okay.